It's so fun. Hello. Okay, there are some people joining. Hi, guys. I basically just wanted to do this because I did obviously my big album announced yesterday, and I know it was the middle of the night for some people, and if they didn't make it, that was really sad. And so I wanted to do this to essentially sort of get to talk to you guys about this album and the journey of this album, because it's sad that if you missed the Zoom, you missed the chat, because the chat was very wholesome and cute. So yeah, essentially, you've probably seen by now. If you haven't seen by now, my second album is coming this year. It's called The Good Witch. Screech. I can't believe you guys know that information now. That's the craziest thing. And yeah, I did this Zoom yesterday where I sort of spoke about it and spoke about the journey towards it, and I wanted to do the same thing, but for you guys. So essentially, making my first album, You Signed Up For This, was so special. It was like one of the sort of the most special times of my life, really, like both the writing of it in that studio in Decoy in Suffolk in sort of summer 2020, and the releasing of it, the playing of it, those shows, those festivals, the record store tour we did, Banquet Records, then the North American tour in March last year. All of those, the stadium shows we did playing that album sort of throughout the UK and Europe, all of those moments were so incredible and so special, and I will just never forget them. But I needed to at the same time. I was thinking the whole time throughout this, I was like, oh God, I need to make another album, and I need to love it as much as this album, and that is impossible because I love this album so much. But I sort of set to work last year. Essentially, the whole of last year, I was playing these shows for you, and then I was also simultaneously running to the studio every chance I got and writing. And I did that sort of throughout the Ed tour. I would go on tour 3-4 days a week, and I would come home again and I would just go to the studio. Or I would fly to Norway, to Bergen, or Stockholm. And I did all those things for about a year, sort of just collecting. And then when the tour finished in September, I went to Stockholm for 2 weeks. I went to Decoy studio in Suffolk for a 1 week with Joe Rubel, who wrote a lot of You Signed Up For This with me, and then Brad and Jez, who I wrote Place We Were Made with, and Best I'll Ever Sing, and Favorite X, and we wrote together as a group. Essentially, and then I went to Norway right at the end of that. And I essentially, with all of those times combined, I managed to sort of find myself in a place where I had a whole record, and I had a title track, I had a title, and the title was the last thing that came, and I was absolutely, oh my goodness, it was probably it was absolutely without a doubt the most difficult part of making this album was picking the title. It was so hard, and I had a million different titles, and I couldn't work out I think the thing is with this body of work is it's so expansive, and it goes across so many genres and so many feelings and so many parts of myself. It's like this album so accurately reflects me, but it's so there's so much diversity in it, I guess. There's so many different tangents and feelings in it, and I didn't know how to summarize it. I was like, it's so expansive, I can't summarize it. But eventually I sort of sat in the studio one day. Joe and I were finishing History of Man, and he was finishing it. We were in Pixel, his studio in King's Cross, where he's unfortunately just moved out of. One of the last sessions in there, we were finishing this song, History of Man, and I sat there and I was like, okay, I'm going to write a paragraph on what this album means to me and what it's about and what inspired it. And so I was writing this paragraph, and I found myself talking a lot about the magic of this music and the magic of what it had done for me and the magic of what I hoped it would do for other people. And I used the word witchcraft, and I sort of kept coming back to this idea of myself being the holder of the cards and the puller of the strings, and sort of being in control of this tornado. And I guess the more I felt, the more I thought about it, the more I kept coming back to this title that I'd had in the back of my mind for a long time. And it had been, again, another part of why this felt very fated to me, this album. A lot of things in this album felt very fated. And that's half of why The Good Witch has sort of come to mean so much. But some of that, hang on, let me gather my train of thoughts. I forgot what I was going to say, which is so bad. I was talking about The Good Witch, wasn't I? I was talking about The Good Witch and how, the title. And it had been, yes, so I'd sort of just had this title in my mind of The Good Witch, and I don't know how it got there, I don't know when it got there, but it was around, and I'd thrown it out to people, and we'd sort of played around with it, and then I'd taken it out for something else and something else and something else, but then when I was really coming to crunch time and I had a week left to decide, I just kept coming back to it, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt like it really actually perfectly reflected me and the person I was making this album. And I think there's a lot of that album, the title to me reflects, there's like a lot of there's real like magic in there, and there's real femininity, and there's real benevolence, and there's real cruelty as well. And it reminds me of, there's a Joan Didion quote. Somebody wrote about Joan Didion, who I love and who I read a lot of in the making of this album, and really inspired a lot of this album to me. And somebody said about her, Joan Didion wastes no bullets. And that was exactly how I felt writing this album. I felt like I'd sort of used every part of my heart was in this album. There was nothing I hadn't said. And yeah, there was a lot of magic in it. There was a lot of witchcraft in it. And as this process, as this campaign goes on and I tell you more and more about this album, and I'm going to tell you more and more stories of different songs, and you're going to understand how much true magic there was. And there's no more magic than the fact that the day I finished this album, the day I did the final mix and it got sent to master and it was done, there was a snowstorm in London, and snow is my favorite snow is my favorite weather, and especially snow in London. It's like the most magical thing to me. And yeah, it was suddenly a full snowstorm. It was the night I finished the album, and there's a lyric on this album, which I'll tell you, and this is the first time anyone's heard it, but there's a lyric on this album, on the last song I wrote for this album, which is a song called There It Goes, and it's very much the end of the story to me, or the end of the story at that time. I wrote that song and I knew I'd finished the album. I knew that I'd said everything I needed to say, and I knew I was closing the chapter. I was closing the book. That was the final chapter of that story and that part of my life. And in that song, there's a lyric, and it goes, "The love we had was covered in snow. I had to let it go." And then it snowed. And it was like a really surreal moment of just being like, I've literally willed it into being, I wrote it, and it happened, and I have let it go. And it was just, it was a really special time. And we all went out in the snow, and it was just crazy. And I remember texting my friends and being like, you won't believe what's just happened. But yeah, I mean, so the album comes out June 16th, which I keep forgetting. I keep getting the date mixed up, which is hilarious of me. But yeah, it's called The Good Witch. It comes out June 16th. I'm just so excited. I can't believe we get to make a whole new era. I mean, isn't that the craziest thing? Think about how wonderful MP1 was. And I have as I said at the beginning, I have so many memories of MP1 that are so important to me. And the idea that I get to make all these new ones is just the craziest thing. I'm so lucky. I can't believe I get to do that. And I mean, yeah, we're going to be playing festivals. We're going to be, I'm sure you know as well as I know, there's going to be tours. There's going to be all sorts of things. And it's going to be just magical. That's honestly the word of the day. Magical. Are there songs we've heard before on the album? I'm not sure. I don't think on the current album I don't think I've teased any of the songs. I felt quite strongly making this album that I want you guys to hear it. I wanted you guys to hear it as and when I knew what it was, I love teasing music, don't get me wrong, and I'll do it forever, and I'm gonna play you guys obviously some of this album before it comes out, but I really wanted to definitively know what it was before I started giving it out. It felt important that I had to keep it pure and sacred before I could do that. So I think you might have heard little lines or little one-liners, but for the most of it, you've not heard any of it. But I know there are some songs that everyone loves that I've teased. I know, for example, Bite on This, Yoko, and believe you me, those songs are so special to me too. And listen, Never Say Never. That's my doing really bad wink. Let's see, what's going on? Favorite song. My favorite song on this album. There's so many that are so special to me. History of Man is really important to me as a writer. The Band and I is so special to me. Maybe one of the most. It tells the story of that North American tour in March. And that tour was was really important to me in a lot of different ways, like personal, professional. It was just a really formative month and a half, and I knew I had to chronicle it. And I'm going to tell you guys the story of that song at some point, and it's a crazy story. Like, it goes over months and countries, and yeah, I mean, it's a crazy story. Let's see. Are they upbeat or slow vibes? Different. There's so many different. The track list is already released. You can find it on Instagram, on Twitter. It's up. There's 15 songs. Yeah. Is there a storyline behind the entire album? Yeah, it's basically my twisted version of a breakup album, I would say. And yeah, it tells that story, I guess. And that's all I'll say on the matter for now. Okay, cool. Well, listen, guys, I'm going to do at some point a Q&A because I have so many you guys have so many questions. I want to answer them so bad. And yeah, but for now, I'm going to leave you with this. The Good Witch, it is coming out this year, June 16th. It's going to be amazing. I'm so proud of this album. I think it's my best yet. There's never been a body of work that feels more true to me and more honest and more important and more reflective of who I am. And yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. Okay, amazing. I love you all very much. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And